So in this video, we're going to take a look at the aristocratic Greek warrior, with a special attention then on Sparta, as well as the aristocratic kind of life in the Archaic period of Greece, and looking at religion amongst aristocrats in Greece. So the aristocratic Greek warrior, the aristocratic warriors were not only engaged in battles, but also took active roles in governing. So, in one sense, being a warrior was a very important part of how one became recognized as people who can participate in the governing of a city. So, being engaged in battle, being prepared for battle. So, what you will oftentimes have then is men who are going to have land and they're going to farm the land or have someone farming their lands, having slaves, but they're using their free time to uh, practice, as it were, engagement in battle, because there's oftentimes a need to protect one's fields, protects one's city. And so there's not like always a standing army that they have. And so people are going to be called into battle, not only if they're going to have to defend themselves from other cities who may attack them for their resources, but also when they need to expand their territories in order to get additional lands, in order to prosper. So it is the landowner, the aristocrat, as it were, who is going to make sure that he himself and his sons, his household, are going to be able to contribute to the protection of the city and to the advancement of its people. So they're going to as well play an active role in governing. So when you think about a soldier, when you see movies about Greek warriors, they're not just soldiers, modern day army, but they are people who also take care of land. So Homer puts the relationship between those who engage in battles and their socio-economic and political roles in a very positive light. And so you might take an example, Sarpedon's speech in the Iliad, chapter 12. The person who is seen as a warrior is seen as representing, as it were, the best of Greek masculinity. The warrior is the one who demonstrates courage and bravery and loyalty. They are the ones who demonstrate what it means to be loyal to one's family and to one's city. So strong correlation between what it means to be a ideal man is connected to the ability to fight. Greek warriors adopted what's known as the phalanx tactic, and this primarily expressed in military terms the ideal of a community in the polis, because of the ways which the phalanx was designed in order to have soldiers in very close proximity to itself and working as a unit. So, to the city has its inhabitants close within its boundaries, within its walls, and it needs to act, or it needs to function, as it were, as a unity, and that it can be more successful in both in its offensive activities as well as it's necessary to defend. So the poem of Triteris extols that enduring the horrors of a hoplite battle was required really to be a citizen. So in the previous video, we talked about what it means to be a citizen of a city. In one sense, for this poet, the way a person earns the right to be seen or recognized as a citizen of a city is being involved in a hoplite battle. So a hoplite is basically a heavily armored soldier. So you have your shield, and you have your spear, and you have your helmet, and you're able to engage in battle with this equipment on you. So demonstrating your strength as well. So a happy life is one that ends well, even if in battle, if one is honored and leaves an heir. So whereas for a lot of people there might be a fear of death, for the aristocratic Greek warrior, it is a fear of dying poorly. So if you're kind of engaged in battle and if you're going to die in battle, that can bring, as it were, a happy life to you because you know that you are going to be honored as a person of bravery, a person of courage, and that your family would be looked upon favorably because of how you acted. And especially if the soldier has left an heir. So this is going to be kind of interesting, particularly with uh, Alexander the Great later on, who is a great warrior, but it took Alexander quite a while before he had a legitimate heir. He may have had heirs by means of other women, but not those who were going to inherit his empire. So for Greeks, especially for the concept of how a man is going to have a happy life is going to determine how well they are prepared to engage in battle. Now, the hoplite polis, the hoplite city, would really be represented best by Sparta. So lots of stories about Sparta and about their bravery in this city that really, uh, you know, marked itself at one time as a city of great warriors. So Sparta is again located in the southern part of the Peloponnese. So think again about Greece, and it's that southern part of Greece that is the Peloponnese. So in Sparta, every citizen, of course, we're talking about males here, was to serve in a hoplite phalanx. So you were required then to participate in defending the city or advancing the city's interests. So this required, of course, the military training of all men, of all males. And so Sparta's reputation came that the intensity of a training that went into warfare. So because every male had to serve as a warrior, that each one was granted the right to attend the ecclesia, the assembly, and hold civic offices. So once again, government roles are on the condition of whether or not you participated in in a war or in a battle. So men or males who were weak or sickly, who did not participate, could not help in the governing. Now you'll notice here that I have the word ecclesia, so I've transliterated here the Greek word translated as assembly. Some people may be familiar that the word church, the English word church, is a translation of the Greek word ecclesia. So when these early Christian communities, at least the Pauline communities that we are aware of, and when Luke as well will describe these communities, they might use the term ecclesia to describe them. They are an assembly. So church is really the assembly of citizens, as it were, in God's kingdom. So early Christians are utilizing political language to describe uh, their own types of community. They have a Lord. This Lord, as it were, has defended them, has fought courageously, has died courageously, but was rewarded, honored with his ascension. They are his subjects. They make up, as it were, his kingdom, and they have obligations and responsibilities to him and to each other. And so the term ecclesia just describes when they get together, either as an assembly in a location. So when they come together, either on Sundays or other days, in order to give praise and worship, it is that aspect of assembling being recognized as members of that. And so, of course, the church, the ecclesia, is made up of both males and females, and it doesn't really matter if you are in military, sir, you have that aspect of military at all. It is just recognizing that you come together to share, as it were, your joint praise and adoration of Jesus. So the Sparta is a place that really recognizes the warrior. So, but Sparta was eventually defeated by Thebes. So this is another important city, just kind of off north of Athens, and they were defeated in 371 BC. Now, let's talk about the aristocracy in the Archaic period. So, with the rise of the new polis during this period and economic growth, new hereditary aristocracies arose. And so, with new aristocrats came as well land shortages. So, this is an important part about development. As populations grow, there becomes a need for an acquiring for land. And the way in which the wealthy people gather more land, if they don't have enough to leave for their children, they have to acquire more land. You do this through colonization, or you do it by going out and taking, as it were, other people's land and then using it, for yourself. And because you've taken the land of other people, you sometimes then, those people who've been defeated then become the slaves or the tenants on that land. And so in Greece, we're finding these different polis that exist, and they are run by members of the aristocracies. And these members of the aristocracy want to continue to prosper and to grow, not only for themselves, but for their city. And so they're going to need to acquire the land or the resources of surrounding regions. So economic growth grew with commerce between these polis, and particularly Egypt and the kingdoms in the New East. So in particular in Asia Minor, what the Greeks are going to do is they are going to establish Greek cities. And these Greek cities are going to play a very important role in the relationship of Greece, Macedon, and Asia Minor, and particularly when there's going to be conflict with Persia, because Persia is going to end up getting Asia Minor, and it's going to have many of these Greek cities under its empire. But before all of that, we see Greeks going out, as it were, and colonizing areas, not only in the east, but also even in the west, into places like Italy. So Greeks venture out, and they establish these cities and fashion new areas that they can begin to grow, grow new produce to enrich themselves, to send produce back to Greece. So it's all about the ways in which prosperity can be measured, and setting up these cities in different areas, and of course training of the male citizens to be able to fight. Along with the increased wealth that came from this expansion during the Archaic period, we also see them spending lots of their wealth in artistic ways. So we will see the creation of athletic festivals, so like the Olympic Games, as well as other games around different gods. We see the creation of symposiums. So symposiums are basically like drinking parties, but they are also times not only to eat and feast, but also to learn. So there's oftentimes some kind of education that could go on during these symposiums. Certainly poetic works, singers, ballads are going on. So we see an explosion of poetry. We see an explosion of sculpture. So a lot of the sculptures that people see and connect with Greece are things that are coming out of the wealth that has been generated or created because the Greeks have been expanding and they have been colonizing. And we also see a great deal number of pottery and domestic goods, so those things that are on display oftentimes in museums representing Greek culture are coming from the Archaic period where, because of the wealth that has been generated, they can then employ artisans to create better quality materials that are going to be used by its citizens. But there also appears non-aristocratic rich people. So aristocratic tends to be the wealthy landowners that are attached, as it were, to the city. But there were also other rich people who are not really citizens of the city. And so they're not welcomed, as it were, amongst the aristocrats. So you might think of like merchants. So they're not really landowners, but they are traders and they can acquire a great deal of goods and they have acquired a great deal of wealth, but they're not really, as it were, attached to the city. They may not have been residents of the city, born in the city. They may have gotten their wealth by some other means. The landowners respect or recognize. So we'll now have this other class of people, not just the landowners who are the governing powers, but we also have other wealthy people on the scenes. But also we know that during this time is a celebration of male and female beauty. And of course, this again going back to the statues that people will see and observe, the ways in which the idea of maleness or femaleness is represented in sculpture. So oftentimes then the well-definedness of a body, the proportionality of the body, length of hair, whether there's hair on the face for men, all of that then is a projection, as it were, of the ideal person that should be aspired by all citizens, as well as the households. Now, I'm going to end here with a section on religion in the aristocratic Greece. So Greece was primarily a polytheistic culture, and the gods were not necessarily friendly towards humans. So, a lot of times people in more contemporary religions think of God as being favorable to them, God caring for them, or having compassion or mercy. So for the Greeks, the gods were not necessarily inclined towards humans. And so the relationship had to be carefully managed and maneuvered. So positive relationships with the gods is based on performing the required rituals and sacrifices. So for the Greeks, the gods actually benefit from the sacrifices. They benefit honor, or they can actually benefit from the smoke or the incense that is burned. So that's going to be quite different than when you see in Israelite religion, who thought about Yahweh not needing the rituals, not needing the sacrifices, but that he is honored by the rituals and the sacrifices, but he doesn't consume the smoke. He doesn't actually consume the flesh of the animal that is being. But for the Greeks, the god somehow or another can benefit personally more than just the honor of those sacrifices. So almost every aspect in Greek culture was linked in some way with the cult that worships a god. So every aspect of life is connected with the gods. So what one eats, what one drinks, the land, the water, the seasons, things that have to do with disease and health. All of these are connected with the gods. And when one becomes sick or when one has a disaster, calamity, it is because some god is upset, and one has to try and recognize which god it is and then make the appropriate sacrifice to get that god on your side so that the catastrophe can be turned around, that the disease can go away. So every aspect then of life is connected to the cult. A bond between a god and a person and their family was affirmed through the sharing of a meal of the flesh of a sacrificed animal. So if you want to have a sacrifice, some sacrifices can be where it's completely taken up and the sacrificer, the worshiper doesn't participate, but others can have sacrifices where it basically cooked, the meat is cooked, and then the worshiper takes that meat and eats it himself. His family eats it, and by eating this meal, the god has eaten part of it. The family eats part of it, and so there is this bond, this connection with that god through the meal. And Hesiod and Homeric poems are really the foundations for our understanding of Greek beliefs about gods. So when we want to think about gods, we really have to be familiar with their works, and oftentimes the descriptions of the gods that we have are dependent upon the works of these two authors. So we'll leave that as just a brief kind of introduction to religion in aristocratic Greece, especially during the Archaic